Hello! So, welcome, fourth graders. We are going to continue in our first chapter of history. So, we are going to talk about pages 6 through 8. We're going to look at the Bering Strait, Central America, how people are creative because God made them in His own image, and God is creative. Just look around. The animals, the trees, the different things that God created are amazing. We're going to talk about the first Americans. When did they get here? Christopher Columbus's arrival, Pilgrims, Puritans, and the Mayflower Compact. This is actually like a ton to cover. A very big time frame that we're looking at because we're starting like with the Tower of Babel and then moving into the 1700s, the Great Awakening, and things like that. Okay? All right, let's begin. So these are my notes, as you know, and I'm going to be using my notes to make sure I stay on track and that I tell you everything that I need to tell you. Okay, so way back in Bible times, yes, people were all talking the same language and they decided they should build a tower. And it wasn't that they were building a tower, it was the symbolism behind what they were saying. So they were saying things like, we're going to make ourselves greater than God, we are awesome, we're going to make our tower up into the heavens. And God saw that they were sinning, and so He decided to give us a gift, actually. And He decided to confuse the languages. Believe it or not, we all used to speak the same language. Isn't that very interesting? So He decided to confuse the languages, and what happens when people speak different languages? They kind of group together. That even happens today. If you go to like New York City, you have places like Chinatown where the people all speak Chinese because they're comfortable speaking the same language together. So this happened, but on a global level. So as the group started leaving the area, and they went and found other lands. And one of the lands they found was what we consider the New World. Okay, so think about the globe. I don't have my globe, it's at school. So think about the globe. And if you remember that Russia and that come above, yeah, and they actually like are with Alaska. Sorry, I just lost the train. And so there is a section called the Bering Straits. So straits is a body of water that goes between two landforms. Okay, so the Bering Straits. Some people believe at one time there was a bridge that connected, like Asia with Alaska. Okay. So let's go ahead and start looking at these things. So, people might have crossed the Bering Straits, and then they came into North and South America. Remember we talked about when we talk about the Americas, we're talking about North America, Central America, South America. We're talking about the two continents and then the little, not peninsula, isthmus, I think it is. That's between the two. Okay. So, Central America. So a lot of people came down into Central America. There were very large cities built in Central America. There were thousands of people who lived there, and thousands of cities and things that were there, and they built mighty structures. Whew, I'm not doing very good today with remembering what I wrote down. So the mighty structures, like one of them is pyramids that they built, and they grew food, and they were able to figure out the foods that grow there. They did a lot of agriculture. You know what? I'm just going to start again. Hello, good morning, fourth grade. Welcome back. I hope you had a great weekend. We are going to be looking in our history books at pages 6 through 8. Okay, so we're going to discuss it first, and then you're going to go read and do some packets. All the packet pages are attached to your assignments in Google Classroom, and then submit whatever you finish. All right, which is the assignment. Okay, All right. We are going to be doing a lecture and you're going to be working on your final project. I actually have the assignment set up that's like every other day. So if you are not approved yet, you need to go ahead and work on your approval because you can't do anything until you get the approval. I have 3 students who aren't approved yet, so you guys need to please contact me and do that. All right? Okay, so today we are looking at the beginnings of civilization as far as the migration goes and people coming to the American continents. So we're going to be looking at something called the Bering Straits. Oh, the R is missing. S-T-R-A-I-T-E-S. You know, that hand not going as fast as my brain. All right, so the Bering Straits. We're going to talk about Central America. We're going to talk about how people are creative because they are made in God's image, and God is super creative. Just look around at His creation. You know, octopus and alligators and giraffes and platypus. I mean, there's a lot of things you look at and go, wow, that's really interesting. Very creative. Okay? We're going to be looking at the Bering Strait Sea Passage. It's very close. It's just a little bit of water between Siberia and Alaska. So that would be Asia, the continent of Asia, and the North America. And we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about the first Americans. When did they come here? We're going to talk about Columbus's influence. And then how Europeans came after that. The Pilgrims and the Puritans, the Mayflower Compact. So we're going to start out way back before Christ and talk about the Tower of Babel. Okay? So at that time in history, before they started building the Tower of Babel, basically everybody lived like there in that area, which is where we talk about like Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Israel, and that area of the world is basically where everybody lived. And so what they decided to do, as sinful people do, they decided to sin. They decided they were going to build this giant tower up into the sky, into the heavens, and be greater than God, which is not good. So God saw that happening, and He decided to give us a gift, which I know it doesn't really sound like a gift, but if you think about it, it is. He could have just wiped them out. But instead, what He decided to do was He decided to confuse the language. So at one point in history, every person spoke the same language. So what happened was He changed that. So one minute you're talking and the next minute you're talking, but other people aren't understanding you because now this one's speaking French and this one's speaking Spanish and this one's speaking Italian and this one's speaking English and this one's speaking Hebrew, okay? So they're all speaking like different languages. So what do people tend to do? People tend to like to hang out with people who speak the same language. It's a lot easier to understand someone who's talking to you the same, yes? If I start talking in French to you, you would not understand me. Or if I start talking Spanish to you, only one person in our class would understand me. All right? So whole groups of people that talk the same language tend to kind of hang out together. Okay, that is even true today. So if you go down to Waikiki, if you go in town, you will find Chinatowns there. A lot of people there, they all speak Chinese. Okay, so they all kind of, when they immigrated here to Hawaii, they hung out together and they formed a place called Chinatown, and they all spoke Chinese. You have Chinatown in New York City too. You also have Little Italy. When all the Italian immigrants came over, they all settled close together because they all spoke the same language. Does that make sense? All right, so what happened was as these groups of people started like speaking the same language and getting together, they decided to separate from other people. So they started to move and fill the earth that God had created. All right? So what they think happened, they don't know because they weren't there. Nobody was there. I mean, the people who were there didn't write it down. And what they think happened is they think that maybe there was a bridge. It's called a land bridge in the Bering Straits where people came from the continent of Asia, because that is where Israel and all those places are, through Russia, Siberia, which is super cold, and came across and into what is Alaska today, and came down into North America, Canada, so where the United States is today, Central America, which is like El Salvador, Honduras, keep wanting to say one that's not there, Dominican Republic, okay, Panama, and then down into Central America, like Brazil and Chile and those kinds of places, okay? So that's what they think maybe happened, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to go all the way to the First Great Awakening, which is a huge amount to cover in a short time. Big amount of history. All right, so here's my fancy dancy notes, and off we go. I know you thought we already started, didn't you? All right, so Central America. So as the people came through, they came to Central America. And we know that because we see cities there. There are ruins of cities, of these great buildings that people built, pyramids and things like that. And these were large cities. They had thousands of people in these cities, okay? They were very creative with their building. They were very creative with how they grew their food. And we know this through archaeology and things like that. But we shouldn't really be surprised that they were so creative, because God made us in his image and he is creative, which I think is so cool. Are you creative? Mm-hmm. All right. So they even took foods that didn't used to be edible, and they figured out how to make them edible. Edible means you can eat them and not like get sick or die or anything. So what they did was they took maize, which is like an Indian corn. We call it Indian corn today, but it's called maize. And they figured out how to grow it and use it in order to actually make it edible, because in the beginning it wasn't. So even nowadays, we have something called field corn. And although people can eat field corn is mostly made for cattle. Field corn isn't tender and it doesn't taste yummy or anything. And so you still have things like that today. All right. All right. Unfortunately, like in the Tower of Babel, sin hurt the Central American people. So in their sin, they started worshiping false gods. They actually built temples to them, which you can still see today. Ruins, yeah. And they actually would sacrifice people to these gods. And it was not very good, because God tells us we're not supposed to be doing that kind of thing. A, we're not supposed to worship any god besides the one true God. And B, we're not supposed to be killing people, sacrificing them to any god. All right? God never asked for a sacrifice of a person to forgive our sins. The only one who laid down his life for us was Jesus Christ. And as Jesus said, he laid down, he chose to sacrifice himself for us. It wasn't somebody else grabbing him, okay? Even though the soldiers took him. But remember what he said to Pilate? He said, I lay down my life and I will pick it up again. Okay, so that is it's quite a bit different than me going, hey, you're going to be sacrificed to him now. All right. So Christians learn two things. One, God can do great good as God made us in his image. Okay. We can do great good because God made us in his image. And people can do great evil because they're sinners. So here you have the Central American people, which are Aztecs and Incas. Trust me, I learned about them tons when I was in school. And the Aztecs and the Incas, they made large, awesome cities. You have such cool buildings that have survived all this time. You can go see those buildings today. Okay? But even though they were so smart and so creative and figured out how to make maize work, they also were super evil. and not like all of them, but because of sin, because we're all sinners, yes, the evil that they committed was really bad. The sacrificing they did was really bad. Okay? All right, let's look at the Bering Straits. Oh, this one. So the Bering Straits is a sea passage today between the Asian continent, where Siberia is, Russia, and the North American continent, where Alaska is. It's a short strip of water that goes between the two. Okay? It's short. You could canoe across it. So I don't know if there was land there or not. That's always been the theory that I've been told, but I always looked at it when I was a kid and even now and go, that's not really far. They could have done a boat too. I mean, think about it. We've seen Hawaii on the globe. It's like a little speck, but yet the Polynesian people, canoed from way far away and found it. So certainly you could cross the Little Bering Strait and find it. But they think there was maybe a land bridge. All right. So similar, we already talked about this, similar language people. Okay, I'm sorry. So what they've discovered in researching the people in Russia in that Siberian area on the, say, the east side, the west side, sorry, the west side of the Bering Straits, and the people who live in Alaska on the east side of the Bering Straits, that what they have found is a lot of their language is the same, similar, and a lot of their customs are the same as well. Very similar groups of people. So they think maybe some people settled on one side of the Bering Straits and part of that group of people went over to the other side. Okay? Kind of like in the Bible when some of the tribes of Israel settled on one side of the Jordan. Yeah. And most of them settled on the other side of the Jordan. Remember that? All right. Same kind of idea. All right. So the land bridge that, remember, isn't there today. It's water. So I thought this was very interesting. The land bridge was made a national monument. So not only is that interesting, it's a national monument that's not there. But another interesting thing is they did it twice. They did it in 1978 and they did it in 1980. Which I thought was interesting. I don't know why they did that, but that was what happened according to our book. All right. So first Americans. Nobody knows when the first Americans came. Again, they didn't write down, we have arrived on this date in this time and done this and blah, 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 blah. Okay? So what we do know is when Christopher Columbus came, in 1492, there were people already here. Okay? So remember, he came in 1942 looking for a different route to the East Indies. And so when he arrived in San Salvador, Colombia, I'm sorry, not Colombia, Cuba, he thought he had made it. Woohoo! I did what I tried to do. So he called all the people he saw Indians because he thought he was in India. Of course, we know he wasn't in India. He never made it to India. And he did not only come once. He did several voyages. So he was the first person to introduce Europeans to Americans. We'll call them Americans because they're on the continent of North and South America. Okay? So after he came, a lot of European people were very interested in this area of the world that they called the New World. Because remember, they didn't know it existed before Columbus found it. And they never realized how vast it was for a while. It took a lot of explorers a lot of time to figure out how truly vast this part of the world was. Okay? All right. Almost everywhere the Europeans explored, again, remember, they started all coming from Spain and France, okay? And they all started coming because those are the big ones, Spanish and the French and the English are the big like explorer people, Magellan and Columbus and them. All right, so when they started coming, everywhere they went, there were people there already, okay? So the Americans were already there, all right? They did not find areas of land, that had no people. There were vast areas of land that had some people, not a lot of people, but there was no place that they're like, oh, there's nobody here, we're going to take it all. That did not happen. There were already people here from nobody knows when, except the Lord, of course. Okay? All right, so the archaeologists have found evidence that Americans were here centuries before Columbus ever arrived. Many European countries didn't come because they were like, oh, this is cool. They came looking for things. They came looking for gold. They came looking for fur. They came looking for natural resources. Remember, we've talked about what natural resources are. Yeah, water, cotton, wood, natural resources, yes, that are in nature. And some countries actually sent people to live here. That was their goal. They figured if they could come, they could live, they could work, they could send stuff back. All right? So there are certain reasons why people would come. Why would you pack everything up you own, or some of it, and leave the country you know, leave your house, leave your friends, leave parts of your family, okay? Because maybe your mom and dad and you and your brother went, but your grandparents didn't go, or your aunts and uncles didn't go. So why would you do those things? So people did it because they couldn't find work, okay? There were no jobs available, so they were going to head on out to see if they could find some place where they could get a job. Other groups of people could not worship God in the way they wanted to, and that's where the Pilgrims and the Puritans come in. So these were two groups of people that were very unhappy with the Anglican Church, the Church of England. Okay, there are two groups of people that had two different approaches to how they thought they should handle their discontent with the Church of England. So the Pilgrims, as we know them, actually weren't called Pilgrims. They were actually called Separatists. And the Separatists believed that they should just separate themselves from the Church of England. That they needed to make a complete break, start their own churches, worship in their own way, and that they would just leave the Church of England behind. They didn't think the Church of England could be saved. They didn't think that the Church of England was following the scriptures. They thought that they had gone into ceremonies and not really following what the Lord wanted them to do as spelled out in the Bible. So they were going to separate themselves from the Church of England. This upset the king, and he said, hey, I'll give you some land. That's how they came here. The Puritans had a different thought. They wanted to purify the Church of England. They thought they were not a lost cause, that they could go in and they could change things from within. That they could say, hey guys, look, this isn't really in the Bible. This isn't scripture. We should do it this way or that way. So they still had hope for the Church of England, but they wanted to purify the church. And what they found out is that they actually could not. Again, they caused much commotion, so the king said, look, you guys, I'll tell you what. You guys need to go away. Go to that New World place. Yeah? I'll give you this thing, go. And so that's what they did. These two groups of people, the Separatists and the Puritans, joined together and got on a boat called the Mayflower. And they set sail in 1620. Okay. And they arrived here. I'm just checking my notes, sorry. Make sure I got everything on the Puritans. All right, so the separatists were looking at coming and still living like Englishmen. They weren't going to like turn into Americans, but they were going to be able to worship God the way they wanted to. The Puritans were also planning on worshiping God the way they wanted to, but they were going to do it a little different. They were going to like turn everything kind of upside down. They wanted a government that would make people not sin. Okay? That's not possible because we have sin in our hearts. And yes, the government can make laws that say, hey, if you do this, like if you steal something, you get put in jail, or if you hurt somebody, you get put in jail. They can do those things to try to help us remember not to do bad things. But we only have Jesus that can help us. But we are sinful people, so a government cannot stop us from sinning. But that's kind of what they were hoping for. All right. They were also, the separatists, were hoping to preach the word of God to the Indians. Their idea and goal was to convert them to Christianity. All right. They were not just coming here to start over, they were coming here to do something called proselytize. Proselytize is when you convince somebody to join your religion, but they were trying to get people to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior. That was their goal. Okay. We talked about how people are not naturally good. We're actually naturally wicked. Your parents didn't have to teach you to lie, right? They didn't say, hey, come here, let me show you how to lie. You just knew how to do that on your own, right? Let me check which way this goes. Okay, this way. All right. Okay, so even these guys are talking all about this wonderful thing about government, making sure you don't sin, and hey, we're going to preach to the Indians. When they actually got here, they really were not just to the Indians. Remember we talked yesterday about being just. Being just means to be treating people fairly and correctly. And they didn't always do that. Sometimes they shooed the Indians off their land. Sometimes they made them slaves. They weren't always just in their treatment of the Indians. And remember how we talked about, if somebody comes and takes away your land and then wants to tell you about Jesus, are you going to listen to them? Not really. There was another group of people that weren't very just to either. There were African Americans who were brought over as slaves. The Puritans and the separatists did not really treat them justly either. Okay? So these were two groups of people that they did not treat well, but they thought they would witness to them. And we talked about this when we talked about slavery. If you have been taken from your home and made to work and get everything taken away from you, including your name, are you going to really believe anything that they tell you about Jesus? That's why he talks about our witness and how we should live. All right? So that when we tell people about Jesus, they're not going to go, yeah, you took me away from my home. I don't want to hear about this. They'll say, oh yeah, you're such a great person. Well, not like great person, but you're kind and you're considerate and you're loving and you're caring. I really would like to hear about Jesus. All right. So, Mayflower Compact. That is our last thing for today, and you're probably going, I'm so glad. All right, so Mayflower Compact was an agreement. It was the first written government of the New World. Okay, so what happened is these two groups of people are on the Mayflower. They're starting to come to the New World, and they decide, hey, we have to have some sort of government. We don't want chaos and mayhem. And remember, they thought that the government could make laws so that you would not sin, which of course we know is not true. So the men, the men of the separatist group and the Puritan group, those men got together and they wrote out an agreement and they signed it that they were going to abide by this agreement. And that agreement was called the Mayflower Compact. It was the very first document ever written anywhere about self-governing. So self-governing means that we are going to have people in the government that we are governing over us. It's all in our group. It's all together. It's not like a king or a dictator who's going to rule over us. We're going to rule over ourselves. Okay, that is what a self-government is. And that occurred in 1620. Remember, they got here in November 1620. Not a good time to go to Massachusetts, which is where they landed, in Plymouth, Massachusetts, in 1820. And a lot of them starved to death that first winter, because there was no food, because they got there too late. The growing season was over. All right. So we will continue on the Great Awakening. I'm sorry. We don't have time for that. That is in the next section, 9 through 11. And we will talk about what is the Great Awakening, why is it important, why did it even happen. All right? So I will see you on Tuesday. Bye, guys. Oh, question for today. So I'm going to ask a question on different videos, okay? See if you're watching the video, because you get credit for watching the video. So, question for today. Do you think you would have been a separatist or a Puritan? Would you wanted to separate from the Church of England, or would you have wanted to change it and make it go back to biblical ways? All right? Puritan or separatist? Which one do you want to be? All right. See you later. Bye.